Welcome back to my channel. This is not necessarily a news worthy topic, but on democracy catastrophe, anything and everything can be laid bare to be political. As far as I'm concerned, anything is up for grabs. I know 40 years ago, I used to be a big Twilight Zone fan. I mean, I just like the idea of the surreal. I always like the bizarro of all shows. And when watching some of these shows now, I have an account with was it Sign Out or something. There's some app which you watch like retro television shows. I like doing that because sometimes some of the shows we have today are just plain garbage. So, well, let's be frank. If not on Hulu or Paramount Plus or Peacock, you can forget about what's really good on television. As far as I'm concerned, it might be the wave of the future. I think YouTube has shown the way in which content can be about just about anything and everything, anything and all in between. And with that being said, this one show kind of started to predict what the future is going to hold for us after my lifetime, if not sooner. I forgot what the title of the episode was on Twilight Zone. It was like a 10-minute uh, episode about a birthday of a 10-year-old boy. This boy was looking forward to, eager to take the intelligence test that the U.S. government made. In this story, parents were very, very nervous because if your child exceeded X number of points on the test, the child would be executed. This takes place in, I believe, like 2135 or some bizarre year, but was very, very futuristic looking and everything else in between. And you look at it now, 40 years later, it was kind of corny, kind of cheesy looking, very, very 70s, 80s type of futuristic sort of type of movie setting. Um, Everybody's wearing plastic and stuff like that, and it just looks really kind of odd, to say the least. But in the story, this child was eager to pass. The parents weren't allowed to tell the child that if you exceeded the amount of the test, if you exceeded the points far above the tests were allowed, you'll be put to death. This is kind of like the literacy laws in the South back in the 17 and 1800s, in which if a black man was allowed to read or write, they had to be put to death. because what the government feared was that smart people would overthrow the leaders that did not have a lot of that intelligence. And that's sort of like a what do you say, I just lost my train of thought. Just a second. It's a very authoritative, very fascist way of trying to rule people in order to control people, in order to hold power. So it's like the wealth thing. Do not like smart, middle class, poor people. They don't like they never liked them then, and they don't like them now. And in the story, even though Ross Sterling was dead like maybe 10 years after uh, the show began, this new episodes of Twilight Zone began. It was a 3 season television show. And Twilight Zone got some really good traction after the movie that came out in '82. So I'm assuming that the movie did so well at the box office that they decided we can make this into another series, just do a reboot of the shows that kind of spanned back in the 1950s to the early 60s of a 10, I think it was like a 10 season, it was good for 10 seasons, let's just say that. Like, and I'm thinking why they went this route. Because this is 1985. This was the second term in which Ronald Reagan was voted into office. And I do believe between 85, and I lived through these years, things were starting to change in which more jobs were being sent to China. Also, the Statue of Liberty was being, if I'm not mistaken, was being cleaned from the inside and out. Um, that being said, I think everything was still right on a high of Reaganomics. This was post Vietnam time, and where the Cold War was starting to close in on the end, and now the show was supposed to be reflective of what, quote unquote, the Soviet Union was doing to the people. And in retrospect, I don't think that ever happened. Why? Because they really educated their public. They really educated their citizens. There's no doubt in my mind that Gorbachev was trying to to reinvent, recreate FDR policies that Brezhnev sort of like tried to throw a ratchet in, into the Cold War, in which to kind of expand the Warsaw Pact uh, line against the threat of democracy or the name of democracy. I think about the show then, and I think about the show now. And what I'm thinking is this was sort of like a foreshadowing of what's going to happen after Reagan and what's going to happen in the United States. In the South, education is not as important as people think. You have companies just staying away from those states in which they hold their citizens down. They do not really educate these people. And the most people that live in these states, the major ethnic population in the states, is rural white people. And if you educate anybody in those states, the threat of white minority rule goes out the door, and in place you put in socio-economic growth. And then the threat, and that's a direct threat to many of the old money people down in the South. They'd rather not have you be educated. That's why in most states in the South, the idea of civics being taught in grade school or in college is just beyond pale to them. They think that's going to destroy their their culture inside of their state. The last time that has ever happened was during the Civil War. Now, now if it was up to Donald Trump, civics would not be taught anywhere in the United States. That would be just be sort of like banished. It would be considered illegal. And if you taught something like civics to people in the United States, the children, his dystopian idea, they're educated, they're directed to my power. So therefore, they need to be in prison under the banner, under the guise of the United States Constitution. So, so in retrospect, the question is, can this happen? And the answer is, it's starting to come into fruition. Not my lifetime, but in the next lifetime, it may happen. But it's going to be up to you whether or not you put in the right people in office to make this stop.